Part 3. Smaug the Terrible Calamity Dragon. Smaug is probably the most famous part of the book, and a very important villain in contemporary literature.
And Tolkien was very familiar with them. But at some point, people stopped taking dragons seriously.
Basically, dragons went out of style with the Renaissance.
At that time, we're getting into a very different world of more human foes. Shakespeare's heroes don't fight dragons, they fight each other.
Dragons returned to the stage in the mid-1800s. But all of these dragons were quaint, adorable, quirky, like the reluctant dragon who didn't want to fight the knight.
And Tolkien didn't like that. He wanted it to be more of the ancient dragons.
So, in a sense, Smaug is both the first dragon of modern fantasy and the last mythological dragon, if you like.
Long story short, this is something they didn't want to fuck up in the movie. So let's dive into how they fucked up Smaug. Part 3, Section 1. Peter Jackson didn't care how Smaug looked until it was too fucking late. If you take the time to watch the Desolation of Smaug appendices, you'll find nearly 90 minutes devoted to the imagining and creation of the Smaug that we see in the movies, and how it suffered because of Peter Jackson. It turns out when An Unexpected Journey was released, they knew that Smaug would not be revealed entirely, and therefore they focused mainly on the tail, feet, and eyes. Then when the clock began to tick and Peter Jackson wasn't fucking around on set, he decided to sit down and take part of the Smaug design. And the only thing he had in mind was...
Peter said, I thought about it quite a lot, and I think he has to be big.
Insanely large.
Biggest thing in Middle-earth, who knows what he eats when he's not living in the cave.
I come from an architecture background previously, so trying to justify some of these huge spaces, it just never worked.
So we dutifully noted huge. Then several months later, Peter said, I've been thinking about Smaug, and, he's very old. So we dutifully noted once again, very old.
When your lead concept designer is mocking the director for only coming up with big and old, that might be a sign that the director needs to step it up a notch.
You want to give them a certain degree of freedom. Good to just get parameters of avoid this, avoid that, and then just basically let them go for it.
Different wing configurations, different leg structures.
We explored some radically unusual concepts.
And rocky head formation on the top of his head, so he could almost burrow through.
I was trying something a little bit more brutish and quite heavy set in the jaw, and
when he
he's
sleeps,
living in
the chemicals that make up his ability to breathe fire trickle out of his mouth like drool and actually combust.
More
so you end up with
dinosaurish-looking dragons, some with feathers and triceratops-like crests and horns.
No, none of that. Cut that all out. Just burn it. Throw it out. Trash. Then Peter Jackson puts his creative hat on and says, I know, we'll make it like a Komodo dragon. Then they all bow to him and kiss him on his feet for gracing them with his presence.
Where that changed in our design process was, I think, when Peter started to think about, well, we will see him when he first attacks the mountain, and for that, I want a more agile, youthful dragon.
So we ultimately did abandon the Komodo dragon idea.
So at this stage, we still don't know where his design's at. He's still a long way off.
Then finally, they got closer to a design that eventually turned into the Smaug we see in the movie. I understand that the creative process of movies is very collaborative and slow, trying to narrow it down to a final design. And I'm not saying the design should have been 100% made by Peter Jackson, but...
And that is driven by deadlines. In some cases, the design process doesn't quite find it by the time it gets to that deadline.
We didn't even really have a lockdown design for him when we started prevising that sequence, and this is like 2 months before the film's released.
Workshop is working on it. The eye for Smaug, which we see at the end of the first Hobbit movie, we didn't have a dragon. We did not have Smaug. That was literally us realizing that we had to get Smaug on screen, and we hadn't got a design that I was completely happy with. To tell you the truth, I'm thinking that one exercise we should do is to delete the front legs entirely.
And in March 2013, Peter decided that Smaug no longer had 4 legs, but 2.
And at this point, it was quite a ways down the line, and we're going like, oh my God, we're going to change the design now.
I can almost sense the amount of eye rolling happening and people complaining about Peter Jackson behind his back. But I wasn't there. I can only guess what was going through people's heads.
Everybody in a bit of stunned silence.
Once Smaug had finally decided how many legs he really had,
It did mean we had to go back to a couple of the shots in film 1 where you see him busting through the gates of Erebor in his initial attack. Just went back into that shot even after film 1 had been finished, but before the DVD had been released, and we reanimated that shot with him walking with his wing hands.
I'm not saying Smaug should have stayed as a 4-legged dragon versus a 2-legged Viren, but Peter Jackson needed to have a better idea in mind than he started with. Section 2, Smaug is reduced to a cartoon villain.
Hobbits are remarkably light on their feet. In fact, they can pass unseen by most if they choose. And while the dragon is accustomed to the smell of dwarf, the scent of a hobbit is all but unknown to him, which gives us a distinct advantage.
One of the biggest reasons to have Bilbo come on the quest is because Smaug would be confused by his smell and less likely to attack, I guess. So the whole quest is led up to this. Bilbo going to face the dragon. Smaug drove away an entire race, crumbled a kingdom, ended a dynasty, and killed hundreds of people. No one has dared even come near Erebor for decades because he's so terrifying. So it's an obvious choice to just sneak in and steal the Arkenstone rather than like a full-out attack. So naturally the writers are going to do the illogical thing and have the dwarves fight Smaug.
The climax of this movie was a problem because there wasn't one.
In the book, the dwarves essentially aren't heroic in that moment, and they cower in the mountain, and then the dragon leaves and just lacked power and was essentially unfilmic. You need to see how dangerous that creature is.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have a clue. I really didn't have a clue. I was having to show up on set and give the illusion of someone who knew what they were doing, or knew that there was a plan.
What's this one? This is a third film. Is this the third film? No, it's the second film. I honestly don't even know.
I have so many problems with the Smaug versus dwarves sequence, I don't know where to begin. So I'll just start at the beginning. So the dwarves hear some loud noises and Balin guilts Thorin into going to help Bilbo. Then all the dwarves jump in front of Thorin to protect him from Smaug, even though Smaug would kill them in an instant. Literally. Fucking instant. But instead Smaug wastes his breath on shouting cliche villain lines so they can get away.
You will die.
Then Smaug has a tantrum and shoots flames at the ceiling. I don't know why. Fuck it. And some of these flames get Thorin and he's all like...
Come on.
In 15 seconds, there were 3 problems that pissed me off. 1. Bilbo's purpose in the quest has been taken away from him, thus making him pointless. 2. Smaug fails at killing 7 dwarves because they can jump. This makes Smaug look weak. 3. Smaug's fire doesn't even phase Thorin. This makes Smaug look weak. If all you have to do to escape a dragon is run, jump, then stop, drop, and roll, then he's not a formidable foe. It diminishes him.
You need to see how dangerous that creature is.
Fuck you! The prologue did a fine job of showing what he can do. This action sequence is ruining what you've established. You just lowered the stakes. I could just end the segment here, but I'm just getting started.
We've given him the slip. No. He's too cunning for that.
Oh, thanks for that pointless dialogue. Then Smaug steps right over them without even noticing. Even though he could smell dwarf on Bilbo's clothes and hear his breath, he can't detect an entire squad of dwarves right under his nose.
Lazy writing.
Why are they carrying swords? Then they find a bunch of dead dwarves that are perfectly preserved. Is it like supposed to be like a desert or a bog so they don't decompose? But it's not a salt mine or a desert, it's just a regular gold mine. And these people are clearly extras laying down. They should be like a pile of bones. We already saw that. Then Thorin says, I don't know, we'll kill him somehow. And they all take his word for it.
There is nowhere to hide.
Yes, there is. It's a fucking mine. There's holes and holes everywhere. Then the dwarves resort to Scooby-Doo antics. And Smaug, who's supposed to be smart, doesn't know what a diversion is. Then he hits them with his best shot and it does nothing.
How dangerous that creature is.
What if they hit their heads on the rim of the bin? Their brains would splatter everywhere. Oh fuck, I don't care. Then Smaug chases Thorin down a cavern instead of blasting him with fire. Then Thorin stands on Smaug's nose and Smaug just looks at him. Oh look, they got away again. I can't believe it. It's around this point that Smaug has lost all impressiveness that the movies have built up. He can't hurt any of them. even the one right on his fucking face.
Dangerous that creature is.
The plan's not gonna work. These furnaces are stone cold.
He's right. There's no fire hot enough to set them ablaze.
Gee, I wonder what that line's setting up.
What about we turn the fire against him? If we use fire against fire, what about the forges?
Yeah, that's not fucking stupid. This has happened in like every movie so far, and it always bugs me. Have you ever sat down next to a bonfire? You know, you get too close and you go, ooh, that's kind of hot. Imagine the biggest fire you've ever seen and your face is inches away from it. You would be screaming in pain! Then when they come out of cover, Smaug just resorts to smashing down the gate rather than blast them with fire again. Look, they're totally exposed. Just do it. Even if he needs like a few seconds to recharge, they're out there for a long time. Then the dwarves take a page out of Kevin McAllister's book and set up traps to slow him down and annoy him.
Heads up!
Wait, why are the dwarves suddenly experts at making incendiary devices? Why don't, like, if they can make these, why don't they carry grenades with them all the time? But now they can make, like, fucking explosives? Oh, my fucking brain. And I always assumed that Saruman was, like, the first person in Middle-earth to experiment with explosives. Like, he was the first one to make it. That's why Wormtongue didn't know how it could work. But no, according to this Hobbit movie, explosives have been around and been used by the dwarves for a very long time.
I mean, I didn't have a clue.
This is the third time we've seen Smaug have a close-up where he looks at Thorin and is like, they're gonna kill each other, but it's third fucking time, it's pointless now. Look, it's happening again, that's 4 times. The 4th fucking time Smaug has charged Thorin and then misses him. Then Gloin somehow cuts a cable that can hold several tons of ore with a sword, and Smaug gets tangled in these fucking cables. Wait, is that supposed to be liquid gold? It looks like shit! And then Thorin says, I know, I'll ride a wheelbarrow down this river of molten metal. I'm gonna remain silent now for a moment to allow the sheer stupidity of this to set in.
You're off on a river of gold in a wheelbarrow, but we'll talk to you about that later.
Gold melts around 1,000 degrees Celsius, and his bare fingers are inches away from it. His hair and clothing would combust! And he's riding a wooden wheelbarrow. How do I know it's wooden? Because Haxon and his special effects slave are laughing at how dumb it is.
Means that Thorin's wheelbarrow will be smoking a bit. No, but I mean, it's wooden, so...
Then for the second time in 10 minutes, Thorin is dangling from another chain because Haxon is totally tapped and is relying on the same action beats over and over and over. See, Smaug turns and looks at Thorin for the 5th fucking time and starts monologuing like 1,000 villains before him.
I instilled terror in the hearts of men.
Bragging about how amazing he is, even though he spent the last 20 minutes tripping over his own feet. Then there's a big reveal that the whole movie has been building up to. A giant gold dwarf. A very convincing giant gold dwarf that does not make me want to kill myself.
We thought, wow, how are we going to do that and make it not look silly?
The way this thing collapses proves that Peter Jackson can no longer perceive the difference between reality and CGI. Then Smaug submerges his entire body under what is probably only a few feet of gold. Like, if we use these pillars as a gauge, and we assume that Bilbo is 3'6", then that means that the thinnest part of Smaug's head is 8 feet. Then that means that there's only 8 to 10 feet of gold, but his body's like 34 feet thick? He was hidden completely beneath the surface. It hasn't even reached the other end of the hull, but it was somehow deep enough to cover a dragon the size of 2 747 planes. My brain. So there you have it. We had a 20-minute action sequence that ended up being a total waste of time. The situation is no different now than it was before the dwarves entered Erebor. Here's what should have happened.
It is time I paid them a visit.
Then you use Smaug attacking Lake Town as your climax. This will allow for Bard to kill him, complete his arc, and have a more acceptable ending to the movie. Instead, we have an uncomfortably obvious cliffhanger that tries to trick you into thinking it's an ending because it goes boom, then cuts to black.
What have we done?
Wasted our time, Bilbo. Wasted our time.